Hello friends! So, one of my favorite animals is the hippopotamus. I don't know what it is about them, but when I was younger, I would play the board game with the hungry hippos, and they would just be smiling and eating, and they just seemed so happy. I always wanted a pet hippopotamus as a kid, but from what I understand, they're not as friendly as they look, and apparently they are pretty prolific biters, so maybe it's best that that dream never panned out. And that way, I got to keep both my legs. Anyway, the other day I was reminiscing about my hippopotamus yearning days, and I remembered that I'd recently read that in many ways, a hippopotamus is just like a horse. Really? Well, for starters, etymologically, a horse and a hippo are related, and by that I don't mean the words horse and hippo, which, as the chart shows, through Greek, ultimately derive from two different Proto-Indo-European nouns. And as a side note, the words horse and car are related, which makes sense when you think of both of them as vehicles. Anyway, horse and hippo might not share the same origin story, but hippopotamus shares a semantic origin with horse in the sense that in ancient Greek, from which our modern word hippo is derived, the word hippos meant horse. So for those of you who have been to Greece, you might have noticed that there aren't any hippos there. That's right, they're not really native to the area, and instead live much farther south. So the Greeks, for example, Herodotus, among others, only knew how those animals looked based on descriptions they had heard by those who had traveled to places where they lived and had seen them there in the wild. And as you can see by Herodotus' description, this animal he had heard about, which he himself called hippopotamus, looked like a horse in many ways. For example, its mane, its tail, and the sound it makes, the neigh. So, the name hippos made sense to Herodotus and other Greeks of the same era, but to differentiate this exotic-looking animal from the hippos that they knew and saw every day, the Greeks decided to add a modifier, specifically potamus, or river, to specify that this new animal looked like a horse, but also spent its time in a river, so therefore it should be called a hippopotamus. Now, once the Greeks had a name for this new creature, the Romans followed suit and took the name hippopotamus for their own language, and then over the next few centuries, it spread to a number of modern languages, including English, and many Romance and Slavic languages as well. In addition, in a process called a calque, German and Dutch, among many other languages, including many that aren't related to Greek, took the Greek word and replaced it with words of equivalent meaning in their own language to describe this water-loving mammal that also happened to look like a horse. So there we go, a hippo and a horse, more or less two peas in a very big pod, at least etymologically speaking. Now, from a biological perspective, I recently learned that a horse and a hippo aren't related at all. In fact, the closest relative to the hippo is the whale, another water-loving animal. So if hippos had been named after their closest biological relative, and not which animal they resembled, or at least that the ancient Greeks thought they resembled, then the name for these river-dwelling creatures would be phelanopotamus, or river whale, which to me at least doesn't roll off the tongue nearly as well as hippopotamus. So let's stick with that name. Thanks for watching.